The Pew Research Center recently put out survey results that I found genuinely surprising and not in a good way. Basically, the bottom line of what they said is that a majority of Americans now support public school teachers leading students in prayer in the classroom. It's very disturbing. 53% of Americans say teachers should be allowed to lead kids in prayer in class, with the caveat that it shouldn't be required to participate. But even if that option exists, that kids can leave the room, most Americans are okay with it. And that should disturb a lot of people. Let me show you this image. This is what the Pew Research Center put out here. So 53% of Americans support allowing teacher-led prayer in public schools, but only if students are not required to participate. And let's just break down what this is saying. The blue, I'm going to remove myself, but I'm going to talk over it. On the far left of your screen, 8% of Americans, this is the far right, public school teachers should be allowed to lead their classes in prayer, and students should be required to participate. That's downright disturbing. That is Christian nationalism at its core. 8% of Americans want to shove religion down your kids' throats. But another 37% of Americans say, I want teachers leading kids in prayer as long as kids are not forced to participate. But that's not really an option, is it? Because if the teacher, an adult, is leading kids in prayer, then what are you going to do if you're a student? If you want to leave the classroom, your classmates might make fun of you. There is peer pressure to stay in class and do what everyone else is doing. It's very coercive. That's why, like the Freedom from Religion Foundation gets mad, rightly so, when a high school football coach is leading the team in prayer before a huddle. Because it's coercive, because you're part of a team. You don't want to walk away from your team before a big game. Same thing in the classroom. But again, 37% of Americans think it's fine to have a teacher lead prayer as long as kids don't have to say yes. Another 16% say, I don't want a teacher to lead a classroom in prayer, but I'm fine with it as long as kids get to leave. Which again, wrong answer. It's not okay, and you shouldn't be supportive of it, even with that option. And then this right here, this is the good people. This is the 37% of Americans say, no, what the hell are we doing? Teachers should not be allowed to lead classes in prayer at all. So yeah, that's the right answer, but only 37% of Americans feel that way. That means, if you look at the numbers here, 61% of Americans believe government employees should be allowed to lead religious exercises in public school classrooms. And that sort of support makes it easier for Christian nationalists to enact their agenda, at least in places where promoting Christianity is part of your educational priority, like Texas, right? It's also a warning to all of us who support church-state separation that we have a lot more work to do trying to explain to people why prayer in school is a bad idea, even if it's voluntary, because it's really not. And also, what type of prayers are these teachers going to do? You think it's going to be a generic prayer? No, it's going to be a Christian prayer. So, bad idea. Now, this survey also asked a bunch of other questions like, what about school prayer? Let's talk about some other things here. Sorry, let me jump down here. Which Americans support school-sponsored prayer? That's the next question. Who supports this stuff? It's exactly the people you would expect. Take a look at this. The dark blue on the far left of all of these charts, those are the people who want teachers to be forced, like they want teachers to lead class in prayer and students are required to do it. Those are the dark blue. And as you can see, who likes that idea? White evangelical Protestants, not a lot of them like that, but 80% of white evangelicals say, I'm cool with prayer in school as long as kids have the option to walk away, which they really don't. Black Protestants want teachers leading prayer and kids cannot walk away. That's disturbing, but at least overall, fewer of them want to see prayer in school. And there's all of you right there, the religiously unaffiliated. First of all, who are the 4% of religiously unaffiliated Americans who are like, I want prayer in school and I want my kid to be forced to say it. Also, I don't believe in God. Like, who are these people? I don't get that at all. Republicans want prayer in school more than anybody else. And I was surprised to see there's not a huge difference in the ages. I would have thought older Americans are much more okay with this. That is not the case. There's not much difference between older Americans and younger Americans. And there's not a ton of difference right over here with the region of the country. Yeah, the South wants prayer a little more, but not that much more than the West. So that's interesting as well. What about the political divide? Let me jump to that. I'm sorry, let me jump to one other thing. Let me show you this one right here. What about students leading prayer? What percentage of Americans say they support, favor, or oppose allowing public school students to voluntarily pray in student-led groups? Which is fine. Like, I don't know why this is a problem. This is totally legal. And honestly, I don't even know who's against students voluntarily praying in student groups. But white evangelicals, no surprise, they love student-led prayer. But I am disturbed by this. Among religiously unaffiliated people, 64% of us say, I'm fine with it, which is correct. 35% of religiously unaffiliated Americans say, I don't think it's okay for students to lead prayer voluntarily in student-led groups. That is the sort of shit that Christian nationalists think we're trying to do everywhere, and it's wrong. Legally speaking, students are allowed to lead prayers among other students. It's fine. It's legal. So I'm guessing this is people who don't like it, but the question isn't like, do you like it? It's should it be allowed? So that's messed up. There's one other thing I want to show you, I believe here. Here's the last image I want to show you. This is just everything overall. Look at the left one. What percentage of Americans want to allow public school coaches to lead their team in prayer? And this is not as differentiated as I want it to be. Most Americans think it's fine for like football coaches to lead their team in prayer. And yeah, white evangelicals really like it, but also more than a quarter of religiously unaffiliated people are okay with it. What the hell? No, not okay. And then what percentage of Americans want to see the 10 Commandments in public schools? 24% of religiously unaffiliated people think it's cool to have the 10 Commandments in classrooms. And like, there's not much difference with region, a little difference with age, but also, people don't know what they're talking about is the moral of this story, because there are some things that to me are so crystal clear that we should or should not allow. Teachers should not, and coaches at public schools should not be leading kids in prayer, even if it's voluntary, because it's coercive, because you are a role model, because it's not your job to be the example of how you pray. That's for parents and pastors to figure out, not teachers. So that should not be acceptable ever. If a student wants to lead fellow students in prayer in the lunchroom, at a club meeting, or who cares? That's legal and fine. I don't like it, but who cares what I think? It's legal. So we need to educate people about this stuff. And at a time when Trump and Republicans want to equate patriotism with Christianity, it is very important we get these questions right. I do wonder if the results would have been any different if the language in the survey had not asked, is prayer in school okay? But like, are Christian prayers in school okay? Because that is implied, but I don't know if everyone knows that. Because they're not going to be Islamic prayers. They would be Christian prayers to a monotheistic God. And I think the results we just saw kind of hint that when people know it's a Christian prayer, there is a difference of opinion, because 57% of Americans overall support coach led prayers, but only 50% of Americans support the 10 Commandments in classrooms, which is specifically Christian. So I wonder if the way we phrase this makes a difference. And I think for all of us who talk about this stuff or care about this stuff, it is important to specify when we say we are talking about prayer in school, we are talking about Christian prayer in school, not a generic kind. When coaches are supposed to pray at midfield after football games or lead the team in prayer before a huddle, or you pray at assemblies in school, it's important to recognize we are always talking about Christian prayers, usually conservative Christian prayers. And that might be a more effective way to get our message through. So, I mean, look, we don't need more religion anywhere, much less in public schools. But what's alarming to me is that only 37% of Americans oppose teacher-led prayer altogether. Students have always had the right to pray. That is not at stake. No one's trying to take that out of school. What's at stake is whether government employees should be allowed to lead religious exercises in school. A majority of Americans say yes. That is terrifying. It's exactly what Christian nationalists want to hear because they're going to go further than that. And if they can use results like this to amplify their message because most Americans are okay with prayer in school, Christian nationalists are going to use it to make sure it's their brand of prayer in school. They're relying on everyone's ignorance to do what they want. So I want you to know that. I want you to be on the lookout for it. I want you to speak out against it in any way you can. All right. Questions here before I move to the last story. Where did the survey come from? It came from the Pew Research Center, and I will make sure there is a link. I'm going to put it in the YouTube comments section for those of you who want to read more of this survey. You can read the methodology. You can read the questions. And I'll have it in the notes below when this goes up on YouTube. Has that number gone up or down? The overall prayer in school numbers, I assume, is what you're talking about. I was wondering that too. They did not provide answers to this in the past. And it makes me wonder, maybe they didn't ask this question in this way before. So we're working off of one data point, possibly. So I don't have an answer for you on that one. Who in their right minds could think prayer in schools is a good thing? The pledge was bad enough. It is bad enough, but guess what? If you ask Americans, do you like the Pledge of Allegiance? They're fine with it because they don't understand all the problems with it and what it's actually symbolic of. We got to do a better job of educating people.